All right, future policymakers. Let's dive into something that's probably on your radar if you're prepping for the UPSC.
Definitely.
India's economic slowdown.
Yeah,
Big
that's
topic.
a big one. And the Hindu has some really interesting analysis on this that we're going to be breaking down today.
So we're going to be looking at, why things are slowing down, but
Mhm.
also, what's the budget doing about it?
Right, exactly. How's the government responding to this?
Exactly. Yeah.
It's a pretty complex picture.
Yeah.
This year's economic survey, it really paints this picture of contrast.
Okay.
You've got corporate profits, they're at a 15-year high.
Really?
But at the same time,
Wow. And people aren't spending.
people are not spending, demand is going down.
That's so interesting.
And then on top of that, the government, they said they were going to increase capital expenditure by 20%,
Right.
and it's only gone up 5%.
Huh. And that's before inflation.
And that's before we even think about inflation.
Yeah.
So yeah, we've got a lot to unpack here.
We do have a lot to unpack.
A lot of interconnected pieces.
So it's kind of like having a party, but nobody's showing up.
Exactly.
The music's there, the snacks are ready,
Things set,
but the guests aren't there.
nobody's there to enjoy it.
So for our UPSC aspirants, this demand dilemma, it's got to be a big deal, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. This is something you need to understand.
So why aren't people spending?
Well, the Hindu really points to this widening income gap.
Oh,
You've got big companies, they're doing great, record profits,
right.
but wages just haven't kept pace.
Yeah.
And there are not enough jobs being created.
So people don't have the money to spend.
People don't have the money to spend.
Okay.
So, less disposable income, less demand.
Makes sense.
And then to make matters even worse, people have been relying on credit.
Oh, to buy things.
To buy things, exactly.
Yeah.
And now they're getting worried about taking on more debt.
With interest rates going up and everything.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. So that's adding to the problem.
So this is like a policy challenge. Huh?
Absolutely. This is a huge policy challenge.
How do you boost demand and at the same time,
Right.
deal with income inequality?
Exactly. How do you make sure that growth is inclusive
Right.
and that everyone benefits?
Okay, so let's switch gears a little bit and talk about the government's role in all of this.
All right.
Now, one thing that really jumped out at me from the Hindus' analysis was this whole issue of capital expenditure.
Right.
They promised this big boost.
Yeah. 20%, big promises.
It's promises, but
But the reality is very different.
it's not quite matching up, is it?
It's not quite matching up.
So how does this play into stimulating the economy?
Well, that's the big question, right?
Yeah.
The government's really emphasizing fiscal discipline right now.
Okay.
They want to reduce the fiscal deficit,
Which
means basically they're trying to reduce the gap between
between their spending and
spending and revenue.
Got it.
And, in the long run, that's important.
Yeah. But the concern that the Hindu raises is that are they doing this at the expense of investments
That are actually needed
that are actually needed?
in things like infrastructure,
Exactly.
which could actually create jobs.
Which could create jobs, stimulate the economy.
Right.
So it's a tough balancing act for policymakers.
It is. It's like, tightening your belt today
Yeah,
versus investing in a better tomorrow.
exactly. And sometimes it's hard to see that far ahead.
It is. It is. But, we have to think about the future.
Absolutely.
Okay, so we've talked about demand. We've talked about the government.
Uh-huh.
What about businesses?
Right. The private sector.
The private sector, they're the ones who are actually,
Yeah, they're supposed to be the engine of growth.
supposed to be the engine of growth.
Right.
But the Hindus painting this picture of them being kind of hesitant,
Yeah, a little bit hesitant.
just sitting on all this cash.
They are. They're making record profits.
But they're not really investing. They're not really expanding.
That's so weird.
It is a little bit strange, isn't it?
It is. Why aren't they, taking those profits and growing?
Well, there are a few reasons.
Okay.
One of the big ones is this global uncertainty.
Oh, yeah. The world is
The world is a little bit crazy right now.
yeah.
You've got slow global growth, you've got geopolitical tensions,
Yep.
you've got all this policy uncertainty
Yeah.
in different countries.
Makes sense. So they're kind of spooked.
So businesses are a little bit spooked, they're a little bit cautious.
Okay. And then what about in India itself?
Well, we talked about that weak demand earlier,
Right.
and that's a big factor for businesses.
Right.
If people aren't buying things,
Yeah.
why are they going to invest in making more things?
Right.
So instead of investing, instead of expanding, what are they doing?
Yeah. What are they doing with all that cash?
They're hoarding it. They're issuing dividends
To the shareholders.
to their shareholders, or they're buying back their own shares.
Which That benefits the shareholders, but
It benefits the shareholders, but it doesn't really boost the economy.
not really.
Not in the same
Right.
way as investing in new factories or hiring more people.
Yeah, it doesn't trickle down.
Doesn't trickle down.
So they're playing it safe,
They're playing it safe, waiting for a clearer picture.
waiting for the storm to pass.
Exactly. Waiting for the storm to pass.
Okay, so we've got a lot to think about here.
We do.
And for our listeners, prepping for the UPSC,
Uh-huh.
this slowdown,
Yeah.
it's got to be
This is a major theme.
a major theme, right?
This is something you need to understand inside and out.
So understanding these challenges,
Yeah.
this demand problem, the government spending or lack thereof,
Right.
and businesses being hesitant, this is all key.
This key.
All right, so we've just scratched the surface here.
We have.
But don't worry, we'll be back in part 2 to unpack budget 2025-26
Right.
and see what it's doing about all of this.
Exactly. What's the government's plan?
What's the
How are they going to tackle these issues?
Exactly. And in the meantime, let us know what you're thinking.
Yeah. What stands out to you from this?
So your questions.
Drop us a comment.
And of course,
Hit that like button.
like and subscribe. And don't forget to check out The Hindu for their
Excellent analysis
insightful analysis.
on this topic and many others.
Exactly. We'll see you in part 2.
See you then.
All right. Welcome back to our deep dive.
Part 2.
Part 2, we're talking about India's economic slowdown.
Yeah,
Still going strong with the Hindu's analysis here.
absolutely.
We talked about demand or the lack thereof.
Right.
We talked about the government's, spending plans. What about businesses?
Yeah.
They're being kind of cautious.
Yeah, they're playing it safe.
So let's talk about budget 2025-26.
All right, let's get into it.
What's it doing? What's the game plan here?
Well, the budget, as always, it's a document full of potential, talking points.
For those UPSC questions.
For those UPSC questions, exactly. And this year, it seems like they're trying to walk this fine line, trying to balance a few things.
Okay.
We've got things like tax breaks for the middle class,
Okay.
but we also have continued incentives for big corporations.
So it's kind of a mixed bag.
A mixed bag, it is.
And it's interesting because we were just talking about, the whole income inequality issue.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
And, the Hindu actually highlights this as well.
You do.
That, the economic survey, it acknowledges that income inequality is a problem.
Right.
But are the budget's measures actually going to help with that, or could they make it worse?
It's a good question, isn't it?
It's a very good question.
So these tax breaks for the middle class and these corporate incentives, how do they all fit together?
Well, the tax breaks, they're supposed to boost consumption.
Okay, so give people more money to spend.
Exactly. Give people more money to spend, get that demand going.
Yeah.
But the flip side is that it also reduces the government's revenue.
Oh, so less money for the government to work with.
Less money for the government to work with.
Okay.
Which means, potentially, they have less to invest in social programs.
Things that could actually help with inequality.
Exactly. Things that could actually help lift people out of poverty, provide better education, healthcare.
Yeah, those things.
Those things.
So it's like a trade-off.
It's a trade-off, it is.
Okay, what about the corporate incentives?
Well, the idea there is to encourage investment,
Okay.
to encourage growth.
Create jobs.
Create jobs, exactly. But the worry is that, are those benefits going to trickle down?
Right.
Or are they just going to go to the people at the top?
Who are already doing pretty well.
Who are already doing pretty well, exactly. So
it's that whole debate.
it is. It's that classic debate.
Government intervention versus
Market forces.
market forces. Yeah.
And, this is something that comes up all the time in the UPSC.
Oh, for sure, for sure.
You have to be able to
Analyze those different perspectives.
analyze those different perspectives, exactly.
Okay, so we've got this balancing act going on.
Right.
Stimulating the economy,
Mm-hmm.
but also trying to address this inequality issue.
Mm-hmm.
Now, another thing that the Hindu talks about is foreign investment.
Yeah.
How does that fit into this?
Well, attracting foreign capital, it's definitely important for growth.
Okay.
And the budget is trying to do that
Okay.
by making it easier for foreign companies to invest in India.
Okay.
But, and this is something the Hindu raises,
Uh-huh.
there are some concerns about that as well.
Makes sense.
You know what happens when you give too much power to foreign corporations?
Especially in those key sectors like,
In those key sectors, exactly, like insurance.
Yeah.
Where, their profits
might not line up with.
might not line up with the needs of Indian consumers.
Right, right.
And then there's also the potential for job displacement.
Okay. Yeah, if foreign companies come in.
If foreign companies come in, they might bring their own people. And what happens to Indian workers?
what happens to domestic businesses?
Exactly. So it's a complex issue.
It's a balancing act, for sure.
It is. It is. And it requires careful consideration.
So we're trying to attract foreign investment, but at the same time, we want to make sure that it benefits India.
Right. We want to make sure that it benefits everyone.
And that it doesn't, create
more problems.
more problems down the line.
Exactly.
Okay, so what about homegrown solutions?
Right.
Are there other things that India can do to boost demand?
Yeah, I mean, this is where, as UPSC aspirants, you really have to think critically.
Okay.
The budget is just one piece of the puzzle.
It's not the whole answer.
It's not the whole answer. Exactly.
Yes.
So what else can be done?
Yeah, what else can be done?
Could the government be more proactive?
Okay.
Could they target specific sectors?
That could create more jobs?
That could create more jobs that have a multiplier effect?
Like?
Infrastructure.
Infrastructure? Okay.
Investing in infrastructure, that creates jobs, and then those people have money to spend.
Right.
And then that creates more demand, and it kind of creates this virtuous cycle.
I like it.
And then the Hindu also talks about investing in education and healthcare.
Okay.
That boosts human capital.
Makes people more productive.
Exactly. It makes people more productive in the long run.
Okay, so it's not just about attracting money from outside.
Yeah.
It's about building up what we already have.
It's about empowering people.
Empowering people.
Investing in them.
Exactly.
So they can participate in the economy.
So they can drive that growth.
Exactly, and benefit from it.
So it's not just about the corporations, it's about
everyone.
everyone.
It's about making sure that growth is inclusive.
Okay, so key takeaway here.
Key takeaway.
For those of you prepping for the UPSC,
Yeah.
there's no magic bullet.
No easy answers.
No easy answer.
The economy is complex.
Especially one like India's.
Especially one like India's.
So many moving parts.
So many moving parts.
So you have to think critically, analyze,
Go beyond the headlines.
go beyond the headlines. The Hindu is a great resource for that.
Yeah, they really do dig deep.
They really do dig deep. They give you those different perspectives.
So make sure you check that out.
Absolutely.
Okay, we're going to take a quick break,
All right.
and then we'll be back in part 3.
Sounds good.
Talk about some of the practical challenges.
Right. How do we actually implement all of this?
Exactly, because it's one thing to have ideas.
Yeah.
It's another thing to put them into action.
Absolutely. And that's what we'll be talking about in part 3.
So stay tuned. Okay, so we've talked about the demand problem. We've talked about the government spending or the lack thereof.
Right.
And we've talked about businesses being hesitant, and the budget's kind of a mixed bag.
Yeah, trying to balance a lot of different things.
Exactly. But let's get real for a second.
Okay.
For our UPSC aspirants out there.
Yeah. It's one thing to understand these challenges, but it's another thing to actually
To implement solutions.
implement them. Yeah.
Right, to make them happen.
So what are some of the roadblocks that policymakers might face?
Well, one of the biggest ones, and this is something that, comes up a lot in UPSC discussions, is political will.
Oh, yeah.
It's easy to promise things.
Especially during elections.
Especially during elections, right.
Everyone wants to make those big promises.
Everyone wants to say they're going to invest in education, healthcare, help the poor.
Yeah, sounds good.
It sounds good, but actually doing it.
Actually putting the money there?
Putting the money there, implementing those programs effectively.
Yeah.
That requires a lot of commitment.
Long-term commitment.
Long-term commitment, and it's tough.
Because there's always that pressure.
There's always that pressure.
To show results now.
To show results now, to get those quick wins.
Exactly.
And sometimes that means sacrificing the long-term goals.
Right. It's like that instant gratification versus
the delayed gratification.
the delayed gratification. Yeah.
Which is harder to sell sometimes.
It is. It is. So how do we get around that?
Well, the Hindu really emphasizes the importance of leadership.
Okay.
You need strong leaders.
Who can articulate that vision.
Who can articulate that vision, exactly.
And convince people that it's worth it.
Yeah, convince people that, hey, these long-term investments, they might not pay off immediately.
Right.
But in the long run, they're going to benefit everyone.
They're going to build a better future.
They're going to build a better future, exactly.
So it's about communication.
It's about communication. It's about building trust.
Building that consensus.
Building that consensus, yeah.
Okay, so that's the big picture. But what about on the ground?
Okay.
How do we actually make sure that these programs work?
Right. How do you actually implement them effectively?
How do you make sure the money gets to the right people?
Well, this is where good governance comes in.
Ah, yes. Good governance.
And this is a huge topic for the UPSC.
Oh, yeah.
You need to understand this inside and out.
So we're talking about transparency.
Transparency, accountability,
Making sure that, that the funds are actually
used for their intended purpose.
not disappearing into somebody's pocket.
Exactly. Tackling corruption is a big part of this.
So we need systems in place
Systems in place.
to track everything,
Track everything, to monitor progress.
to make sure that things are actually happening.
And to hold people accountable if they're not.
Right, right.
And the Hindu also talks about the importance of involving local communities.
Oh, interesting.
Not just making decisions from the top down.
But actually listening to the people.
Listening to the people, understanding their needs.
Yeah, getting their input.
And getting their input and empowering them to be part of the solution.
Because they're the ones who are actually going to be affected by these programs.
Exactly. They know what works. They know what doesn't work.
So it's about building that trust.
Building that trust
Yeah.
and building that ownership.
Yeah. Okay, so we need strong leadership. We need good governance. We need to involve communities. It sounds like a lot.
It is a lot.
But, this is where our UPSC aspirants come in.
This is where you come in.
Because you're going to be the ones
You're going to be the ones on the front line.
making these decisions, implementing these programs.
Exactly.
So it's a big responsibility.
It is a big responsibility, but it's also incredibly rewarding.
Because you're actually making a difference.
You're actually making a difference in people's lives.
Yeah.
So, if you're passionate about public service,
If you want to make India a better place,
this is the way to do it.
this is the way to do it.
So what have we learned today?
What are our key takeaways from this deep dive?
Well, first of all, I think it's clear that India's economic slowdown, it's a complex issue.
Yeah.
There's no easy fix.
No magic bullet.
No magic bullet.
Hmm.
It's going to require a multifaceted approach.
A lot of different pieces have to come together. And the second thing is, critical thinking is crucial.
Absolutely.
Don't just take things at face value.
Don't just accept what you read.
Question everything.
Question everything. Analyze different perspectives.
And the Hindu is a great resource for that.
The Hindu is a fantastic resource. They provide that in-depth analysis. They give you those different viewpoints.
So make sure you check that out.
And finally, remember, as future civil servants,
Yeah.
you have the power to shape India's future.
And a big responsibility.
It's a big responsibility.
But it's also an incredible opportunity.
Absolutely. So equip yourselves with the knowledge, the skills, and the commitment.
And go out there and make a difference.
Go out there and make a difference.
All right, so that wraps up our deep dive into India's economic slowdown.
Yeah.
I hope you found it insightful.
I hope it was helpful.
And if you did, hit that like button, subscribe to our channel for more deep dives.
And don't forget to check out The Hindu for more analysis on this and other important topics.
We'll see you next time, future policymakers.
See you next time.